What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heaven, New York, calling from the Alto again, and this time we are here with Katla. Thank you, all three of you, for coming on the show today. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Anytime. The debut full-length album, Scandinavian Pain, is coming out, and I love it when an album title is sort of like what you get, because this does, in a good way, sound like Scandinavian Pain. It's brutal, it's in your face, it's atmospheric, it's beautifully bewitching. That makes every metalhead just kind of lose their shit in that sort of aspect. So excellent work, and I'm very excited for the rest of the world to hear it. Being that you released 2 EPs and a split, though, or actually 3 EPs, might I rather. Were the EPs that you released kind of like meant to serve as like a preview of what this full-length album is going to be like? Or is this full-length album uncharted territory that has yet to have been explored in Katla?
I think in many ways it's preparing ourselves for the full length for sure. But it was also, this was the time when we started writing the full length was when Thijs joined the band. So there was like a natural progression in going from the format that we used and the platforms we did before until like doing full length. It was just like a natural progression, and I think in many ways we're just ready to explore new sounds, or just to maybe start. There is certainly a sound that we want, but just like trying to not think too much about what we've done before, and then do something, not completely new necessarily, but just exactly how we want it to sound, if that makes any sense, I guess.
Yeah, anybody else wanted to add to that?
What Rasmus is saying, it's I don't know if I was sort of not focusing on, but looking a bit at not, I didn't want to come in and break the Katla formula, being the new guy, and I really think that this record is a good evolution or development of the Katla sound without going any radical turns or anything. It's a good. It doesn't sound like Katla before, and it's not like a new band. It's Katla evolving, and I think that's really nice.
Yeah. Because you mentioned that this is a sound that you were sort of going for a while, but like a lot of times when, a band is just getting together and they're putting out their first album or first EP, the future is always so unpredictable. You never know where life is going to take you and what inspiration is going to come your way. So can you almost say that, is this really the sound that you always envisioned Katla making, or was it almost kind of like, in a way, a bit of a surprise that we got this Scandinavian Pain?
I think it have evolved over time. In the beginning, when me and Rasmus met with our old bassist, we really wanted to play Doom, and just play Doom. But we have, in the process of making the EPs, we have added a little more blackish vocal to it, and just discovering what we actually liked and what we wanted to put our heads into. So there have been a progression without losing the old core of what we wanted to do. But yeah, it have been evolving.
Yeah, and I think with Scandinavian Pain, it was also about like finally having the confidence to make an album about some of the struggles that we're going through, and like the stuff that we experience in the world, or how we perceive the world, and then I guess like finally having confidence, I guess, or also the experience, and finding that sound that would suit those thematics in a sense. Finally being able to
being that the EPs that you released prior to this had like a chapter 1 and chapter 2 aspect, does Scandinavian Pain almost relate to it in a way? Because every time I hear a chapter 1 or 2 album, I immediately assume it's like a concept album or it is very conceptual. So does it conceptually address similar emotions or similar feelings as as the first 2 EPs, or were you almost kind of like approaching these with a completely clean slate and not really trying to make it sort of relate or call back to the previous stuff?
I think with Warmongering Luciferians, chapter 1 and 2, it was a concept in the sense of a very like critic view of the Christian church, and like stuff that has been, like in our view, a huge issue for like the Danish society, Scandinavian culture in general. The coming of the Christian church, and I think with Scandinavian Pain, it's dealing with some of the same themes and like issues, but it's definitely like an evolvement from that. It's like taking on like a greater picture of what's actually wrong with the Western world and how we treat the rest of the world.
Why do you feel that the sort of doom aspect or the stoner aspect or whatever genre that the Metal Archives is going to label you as, which by the way I do that, I go on Metal Archives just to see what do they call this style of music, but why do you feel that the style of, because that's a very punk rock sort of like subject matter, Refuse has said it plenty of times, and plenty of punk bands and hardcore bands here in New York. Why do you feel that this sort of style was sort of the best way of expressing your concept?
Just go. Yeah.
I think if you want to make doomsday music, you should play doomsday music. I guess is the easy answer. But we all have roots in hardcore punk, and those are the shows that we love to go to. That whole energy, we're trying to also get that through with the record. We want that energy, that vibe from hardcore punk shows to be shining through in the record. And I think like why then play sludgy doom or whatever Metal Archives would label us as, it's because that soul crushing, heavy, slow sound just really, I think that really suits those subjects in so many ways. There is a way of really getting into like deep, depressive thoughts when you're listening to slow music.
I couldn't agree with you more, because I've always said, and I love punk and hardcore, but one critique I would have of it sometimes, it's almost too catchy to almost really express. Like, I love Bad Religion, but their music does sound very joyful. Hell, I discovered Bad Religion in the Crazy Taxi video game. Like, that's, so like, it's, I feel like sometimes the music almost contradicts a sort of vibe or sort of energy that it's going for, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's true.
no, yeah, totally.
Do you, and also I could almost jokingly say that punks could get more for their money with their album because you're getting songs that are longer than a minute and a half. So
I actually just thought of that yesterday. We have a Danish band that just released a single yesterday. Very, very awesome band called Eyes. And they released a single for their upcoming album, 1 minute long. And we really talked a lot because of the length of this album, like should we and how about and cut song and whatever. And then they go ahead and release a 1 minute song, and I'm like, why do we even bother worrying about length of tracks or not worrying about length of tracks? It's all good. But yeah, you definitely right. You can get like 30 songs in 15 minutes with a punk band, and then we just played a show 30 minutes, 3 songs.
Yeah.
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 do you, because a lot of times, so this is, I get like, I feel like this is almost contradictory depending on what the answer is, but do you want your music to also be open to interpretations? Because with a title like Eating Grapes with Kevin Sharp, I don't know how to like interpret a title like that. And I mean it in a good way. Don't Let the Fuckers Get You Down has a great rebellious nature to it, but that could be applying to anything. That could be a fuck you to politicians. That could be a fuck you to naysayers towards your band. So, like, is there room for the album to be open to interpretation, or do you really want to inform the listener on the evils of the Western world?
Not this time around, man. Like it's very, very important that Scandinavian Pain can be perceived in any way you want. It's super important because of like starting with affirmation texts. Like this is this is meant not for it to be like way too like psychological, but it is meant to have like a therapeutic vibe to it. You know, like this is supposed to somehow be able to relieve you from some kind of like struggles that you have, or some visions and pain and hatred you have towards stuff in the world. And how you perceive it is up to you, you know.
When it comes to, and I want to talk a little bit about the concept of doom as well, because I feel like at that point it's getting pretty vague of a subject matter, and I'm not saying that like it's a bad thing, but like catatonia is labeled as doom, but Candlemass and is also labeled as doom. Sleep is also labeled as doom. Yob is also labeled as doom, and I just named bands that have a lot of differences from each other. So is doom meant to really be an emotion that's demonstrated in a song? Is it meant to really be? Is there an element that all doom has to have, aside from the songs being usually averaging 11 minutes?
For me, it is kind of like the soundscape. In a way, it have to have this soul crushing sound. That's how I usually interpret it by. But I don't know. There can be that. It is also hard with all the genre specific types of. You have to be a certain way. But yeah, for me, it's the sound. That is the most important part.
The definition of doom for you, yeah.
Yeah.
I sort of have the same, and I agree with you that there's sort of everything is doom nowadays. You play doom rock or doom punk and roll, and like it's sort of become an add-on to something else. But I agree with Mark. When I think of doom, it's the heaviness and the weight of the music that comes through.
Yeah, I think when you talk about doom as a genre, you know, like when doom started and then to what doom is now, we could have the same conversation about rock music. You know, rock when that started and what is rock now, and we would be able to do the same thing with bands that sound totally different, but we would all call them rock bands. You know, like it's a genre that's evolving. And I think what I find really cool with doom is if you look at the roster at Desert Fest.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, you can see a headline that's like Electric Wizard, Pentagram, and fucking Dope Throne, and you would be like, those three bands have nothing to do with each other genre wise, but for some odd reason, we all love them.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and that's all great bands, and with Desert Fest have grown into exactly what I love about the definition of doom. You know, and I don't know if it's the same in the New York version, but in the European one, you know, there's a lot of black metal bands as well playing at Desert Fest.
Well, with Desert Fest in New York, we had it at Knockdown Center. I've only been to it once. The last time I was there was in 2022. I haven't gotten to go the last couple of times, but it was an incredible time. And I remember like the night that I was there, Baroness was playing, but then they had like a lot of stoner rock bands. I mean, it was a huge venue that they were playing in, and you could not see more than 2 feet in front of you. Everybody was smoking weed in there. And,
Yeah, right.
So it was a very stoner festival, but even stoner rock or stoner metal, like what would you define stoner? Because like I've gotten stoned listening to Morbid Angel, and I've gotten stoned listening to Mariah Carey. So like, what would you classify as stoner rock or stoner metal as well? I could see people like almost mistakenly calling you guys that as well.
Oh yeah.
I think I don't know if that's conscious choice when starting the band, but I like the fact that there are no songs called Hits from the Bong or the something or other referring to reefer, because that's also sort of, that's been done a lot by other bands, and I get it, and but it's I kind of like that we stay clear, and I like the little reference in the Taurus video that we needed the extra added something, but instead of reefer it was a black metal vocalist. So it's I think that's well played. But no, stoner, I think I don't know what I think. I've had the same thoughts as you, because when stoner really, at least in Denmark, started popping up everywhere, it took on various forms depending on the band. They wanted to play stoner rock, but they weren't stoner, So it's always a different version of what they probably want it to be. So I don't know if what stoner music is anymore. Like you say, it's not
Yeah.
music you get high to.
Yeah, I could see like somebody being very into a stoner metal band, and then like going to meet their favorite stoner metal band and like offering to smoke with them, and then they say, "Oh no, we're straight edge," and it's like almost finding out like Santa Claus isn't real, and then they just like
Yeah,
want to cry.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
Yeah, sure.
being a trio in the band too, this is a question I'd like to ask a lot of times. Do all three of you need to be in the same headspace when writing songs together? Or being that you have your own individual instruments, as well as, you are a band of individuals, you all have your own individual experiences. Is it better? Does it maybe help enhance the sound of Katla if maybe you are in your own individual worlds?
From this process, from writing this album, I feel it's been very much a collective effort. It's been a lot. It started in the rehearsal space, and 90% of all songs developed in the rehearsal space. Rasmus might have an idea that changed the layout of the song based on what vocals he laid upon or on top of it, but it was very much a joint effort creating the songs. I don't know if you I didn't feel like we were three different guys in three different headspaces when creating the riffs. At least
No.
it felt very unified.
Yeah.
Here's a silly question I want to ask all of you, because 9 times out of 10 when I ask how a song starts, they usually say it starts off with a riff. Do you think we will ever run out of riffs one day?
Good question.
I don't think so. Like, whenever I hear music or go to a concert, I always get inspired and make up something by myself in my head when listening to other things. But I need some other inspiration to build upon to create something new. But I don't think I will ever. That will never stop in a way.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah. I mean,
Us, we haven't always, it hasn't always been a riff that had started a song. It can be lyrics or just an idea or something like spurring out of something weird that you've seen or heard or whatever. Because I remember that from the previous releases that has happened. And I think to add to Thijs, there's not necessarily one taking the reins on like how we write songs. It's a very collective thing, and it's not always the riff, man, but it is the riff that rules the song.
Yeah.
Anyways, of course,
We do love a good riff.
yeah.
Actually, and do we ever run out of riff? And I do you think of the world in total, like
Yeah.
everybody in the world? Well, I'm thinking of that. Looking back at my own musical growing up, I always wished I had put more effort into it, and did my ear training, and would be better at getting a riff, hearing a song, and then immediately be able to play the riff. So whenever I pick up my instrument, I'm like, I want to play that riff, and I don't, because I don't have the ability to translate the riff. I always end up playing something ish.
yeah.
That's sort of nice to know that, it sparks something else,
Yeah.
a new riff.
And riffs have been recycled all the time. Like the famous riff, that opening riff that we hear in Mother by Danzig. I've seen that rehashed in hundreds and hundreds of songs. It's done all the time. Maybe the riff could be the same, but the way in which you use it or the arrangement in which you use it is also something you could factor in.
Exactly, and I've thought a lot about, not. I've when thinking about writing music, I often tend to make it more difficult than it should be, and then coming back to just make a good riff and applying it wisely is better than trying to, oh, I need to rethink and I need to develop. And
Yeah.
Dead Lover is a great example of that. It has two riffs. The first riff goes for 80% of the song, and the second riff, the last 20, and the vocals and the guitar does the magic.
But I think with that, like, inspiration is fine. And as Da Vinci once said, the genius steals and the idiot copies.
Wow.
I
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. Which one are you? Or which one are we? Like in that sense. So that's that. Wow, that actually I've studied Da Vinci before, but I haven't heard him say that quote before. And that's a beautiful, beautiful quote. That hit me right now. I'm at a loss of words. But the final question I wanted to ask you is talking about the sort of scene in Denmark, especially with this album being called Scandinavian Pain. I'm wondering in the sense because I've interviewed so many bands from Norway, from Sweden, from Finland, and from Denmark as well. But one thing I've noticed that made Denmark sort of stand out a little bit is take Sweden, right? A lot of people will immediately assume at the gates the Haunted, Dark Tranquillity, Arch Enemy, the melodic death metal band. Norway, I think the first thing that comes into people's minds is Mayhem and Emperor and Darkthrone and Satyricon. And then we get to the Finnish scene, and a lot of people might think of Korpiklani or Nightwish or Einsafirum and a lot of like the more folky sound. But then we get to Denmark. Again, I've interviewed you guys now. I've interviewed Cabal, which is very different. I interviewed Ghost Iris, which is very different. I interviewed Artillery, which is very different. So it seems like that there is, and I'm not saying like in a bad thing, but it really seems like what is the scene in Denmark that is a very small country, but has a very, seems to be diverse metal scene at the same time?
It is.
Definitely.
Yeah.
When we see the other bands that plays, there are not really any that sounds the same. We can't say that, oh, this is, like you said, Swedish death metal or Norwegian black metal. I think there are a lot of different bands that are doing really great right now. And yeah, it is kind of cool to see that we don't really just feed off of each other, like trying to copy each other. We're all doing our own thing in a way, but still we managed to go somewhere with it. But yeah, it's cool to see.
Yeah, and I think if you go back to like the 90s of the Danish metal scene, there was a sound called Danish death metal, and it was like a very distinct sort of, I guess today it would be close to like the bouncy sort of, what is that called? Like the dugga, the chugga chugga.
Yeah,
The chugga chugga. We'll go with that.
Yeah, the dugga dugga chugga chugga. It was like a very distinct sort of like that's Danish death metal sound, and like everyone fucking sounded like that, and it was boring as hell, that everyone did the same. And I think what's really cool now with the Danish scene is that, you're mentioning we're a small country. There is a great metal community, but when creativity is put into like a very small box, like when you have to like kind of evolve from that, it's kind of like making a small stick of dynamite, like the more you compress it, the bigger the explosion. And I think right now with the Danish scene, having like sitting on like the shoulders of Danish death metal, and none of us wanting to really do that, that explosion just ended up with like a ton of great bands that are now like doing super well, also internationally, out of Denmark.
Yeah,
and it's very nice to see that. Let's take Cabal, that because they're doing very, very well. It's not that there's not 10 bands that want to do like we're gonna do Cabal now.
Yeah,
it's okay. They do theirs and we do ours, and it's really nice. It's and I don't feel like there's an element of competition in it. It's just people do what they do, and fortunately, even though Denmark is a small country, there's enough listeners to create the audience for a variety of bands instead of just one scene or one genre, and that's quite nice. and you have like the K Town Death Fest, that's punks and metalheads, and so it's really nice. I think maybe that's also why it's so different, is because you don't have you can't just have one death metal crowd and then the punk crowd, and then you would run out of people here in Denmark. So they need to mingle.
I think that's a very good point, and I'm glad you bring that up, because some would assume, or the prevailing theory was, is if you're in a very small country with a relatively lower population, that there is no room for a metal scene at all. But take Finland, for example, where I think they did a survey that like per square kilometer there's like 2 metal bands. So people are able to like afford to be more selective of what they listen to. Therefore, you'll probably see people, and I think that this is something we have in New York City. We have a great scene here, but when Mayhem is coming into town, I know who's going to be there. And when Cannibal Corpse is coming into town, I already know what crowd I'm going to expect to see there. And then when, Disturbed, very different band, comes into town, I know what kind of crowd I'm going to see there as well. So it just seems like, in a small country, like Denmark, it doesn't matter if it's Shinedown or if it's Cattle Decapitation. It seems like everybody's going to come out to the show.
Basically, you know which people you will meet for sure.
Yeah.
But you will meet them at the country gig, or at the, there's always going to be a metalhead at some show, in Denmark.
Awesome.
That's quite nice.
So before we go, I want to thank you all so much for your time today, and thank you for coming onto the show. Great to be able to talk with all of you. I also really glad, on a side note, to have all three of you, but be in one and to be in one camera is so much easier on my part. When it's like 3 people, but in separate, that means I need 3 people, all with good internet access in their own separate room to show up on time. That is a very rare scenario that could happen. Is there anything else with the release of Scandinavian Pain you would like to promote in terms of upcoming shows or tours, or what we could be expecting in the near future? Please tell me that there is a U.S. tour somewhere in the works.
Well, going to the U.S. as a European band is it's a struggle, man. As you know. U.S. Hopefully not too far in the future, I would say. We're going on a Europe tour now. In 5 days?
Yeah.
We're going on a big European tour. Then we have festival season, and then maybe some touring in the fall. So no US tour in 25, but 26 we'll see you there.
Hell yeah! Let's make that happen. I'm gonna hold you all to it. But thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Katla, Scandinavian Pain. Be sure to pick that up. We will see you next time on Heavy New York.
Love and Satan, man.
Perfect, guys. Thank you so much.